How's it going? I'm Ron.
I'm Zach.
We're from Widetrack, and we're here on Influences, the show where we talk about bands that have had an impact on our music and us as musicians. And this week, we're going to talk about Rush. Rush was one of my earliest influences, certainly as a young drummer growing up. Back in those days, Neil Peart was the drummer god. Between Neil Peart and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, you couldn't find a bigger drummer god in the rock world. And now Zach's kind of discovering Rush and Geddy Lee's bass playing and Alex Lifeson's guitar playing. You want to give us some of your first impressions of Rush, Zach?
When I first listened to Rush, I listened to mostly Signals and a couple things from Permanent Waves. I think those are the first two albums that really struck me. Mostly Permanent Waves. I listened to that album a bunch of times, and then I kind of moved out of the zone of, oh, well, that's the greatest album I've ever listened to. Why do I need anything else? And I started listening to other stuff, older and newer than Permanent Waves. And my first impressions were, I like all these songs. Probably the best album that I've ever listened to would be Permanent Waves or Signals. They're kind of both tied up there for me, but I can't really pick out any favorite songs. I don't know, it was just kind of weird. I didn't really, I knew all the Moving Pictures hits. I didn't really think too many of those were songs I'd ever call my favorite, or one of my favorites. But after listening to them for a while longer, listening to some older stuff from, their debut album, 2112, Caress of Steel, Fly By Night, those four first albums, I kind of found a similarity between them and Kiss, who I had many favorite songs from, or still have many favorite songs from, and it kind of opened up just something clicked, and I started hearing the songs and thinking, wow, those are a lot better now. Like, even some of the newer stuff after their first producer, Terry Brown, left, I still kind of think, these aren't their greatest work, but they're still good songs for the most part. A lot of them are. And so I think it kind of takes listening to them a little bit more than other bands to kind of get a feel for them. And then after that, it's a black hole of, oh hey look, a good album. And you get sucked into the entire world of Rush.
Yeah, it's a little background history. So it's funny you mentioned Kiss, because Rush opened up for Kiss in their early days, and that was, by a lot of accounts, it was a really strange pairing. And so
I think of it as early Rush was a lot like Kiss, a lot like Led Zeppelin, their first album, and even
they were doing the hard rock thing. Yeah, and so Rush had a method that they quickly fell into, where they started off as a hard rock band, and they would do 4 albums, and that 4 albums signified a kind of an ascension to try to perfect this style that they were in. So they started.
You can kind of tell through each album, starting by the next 4, and of course they do a live album after each set of 4.
Yeah, they would mark it with a live album that would sum up the 4 previous albums. Then they would, after that live album, their next
change directions, all that. And
they would.
I think
evolve,
something real interesting about them is you can always tell that one album has come after the next, like the last one. If you were to listen to Fly By Night after listening to their debut album, you would be able to tell, oh, okay, this one definitely came after the first one. Whether it's more of my favorite or not, it's just you can sort of tell that they moved their style kind of up a bit more towards Caress of Steel, and Caress of Steel moving up more towards 2112, and
it was interesting. All
still relating back to the hard rock feel that they went for with their debut album.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about it like that. Now that you mention that, because one of the things about Rush is that they were all married really young, and none of them were ever drug users or not. I mean, they did a little bit of this or that or whatever, but other than that, they
rock
weren't.
and roll drugs.
Yeah, they weren't. And they never fell into the lifestyle. I used to read where they say we would watch these rock stars get totally sold on the idea that they were rock gods, and we just thought, wow, what a hot mess that is. But the point for Rush was always they were just so into being musicians and so into working on what they were doing that each album showed an honest step up from where the last one was. Like, wow, you could tell these guys had been working on their musicianship, and when they were young and just getting into it, you could hear that by leaps and bounds every album.
Definitely.
And by the time they did their fourth album, which was 2112, and that's where they really broke through, they had really kind of mastered their brand of hard rock with a little adventurous kind of lyrics. But their next studio album, A Farewell to Kings, was like, holy crap, what a jump that was.
That's Prague.
They started, like, Neil Peart, the drummer, just went out and bought every percussion instrument available and started playing all this different stuff. Geddy Lee really incorporated a lot more keyboards, and they were using foot keyboards, and so they were just trying to expand their sound. And so by the end of that trajectory, which ended with Moving Pictures, which remains to this day their biggest success, they really mastered.
Chock full of, they kind of reached the end and they said, well, I think we've done enough prog, but we still need to kind of relate back to Farewell to Kings, so why don't we make a bunch of hits and put them on an album?
Yeah, then they got concerned with, okay, we've done the album side long journeys, let's try to write some radio songs. And that right there, those first 8 Rush albums, and their 2 first live albums, for me and for Zach, that's all we need.
Well, wait, give me just a moment. Starting off their next phase, the keyboard phase, right in the 80s, 82, they had one more album left with Terry Brown before he finally said...
Their producer, the man that produced their first 9 albums then. I guess, I forgot about.
And they did Signals, and Terry Brown was saying, look, you don't want to become the Police.
Yeah.
You don't want to try and fit into the swing of the 80s. That's not you.
It did end up being a thing where they mutually understood, like, Terry Brown felt, from what I've read, he said, we had more work we could have done. But Rush, rightly at the time, being true to themselves, said we just needed to break out of the mold and really go out and just experiment and try different things and try and be on the radio, and I applaud them for all that. And certainly that last album with Terry Brown, Signals, which a lot of people criticize because it has a lot of keyboards, but for me that is one of my favorite. That first side of that album to me is like the perfect album side. I enjoy it every bit as much as anything else that came before it. And so I call that everything that Terry Brown produced, the Terry Brown era. And it's once they started using different producers, their sound changed dramatically. And I always supported them because
they're trying new things and being true to themselves and saying, well, we've already done that, we're not going to do that again.
They're just the most down-to-earth human beings, too.
While also still saying, well, there's more we can do.
Yeah, they just always wanted to be better musicians and better at their craft, and it was never about an ego trip.
Something that I admire about them as well is they found the key that I think is the key to being a great musician, and that is being constantly ambitious, no matter what. Always wanting to go further, saying, this is not difficult. I can do more than this.
Yeah.
And at least that's what I tell myself. I'm sure they said this is difficult, but I can still do more than that.
Yeah. And I think before I forget about it, it really bears mentioning that Neil Peart's lyrics, I don't think it's exaggerating to say that the man is a modern day prophet. I think a lot of the lyrics that he has written are just so chock full of
Good advice.
good advice, practical wisdom.
And stuff that you should incorporate into your everyday life as you would with any other.
Yeah, and that makes for some
speakings.
people, puts some people off. It's not very rock and roll. It's not very sexy. It's not very cool to be so nerdy. But they can back it up because they do rock. I mean, you know, Zach and I were sitting down with Natural Science recently trying to play these riffs together, and that shit is badass, man. That
I play it better than him.
yeah, okay, we'll see. No, but I mean, they have some wicked riffs, and it's wicked fun stuff to play.
Mm-hmm. Anthem,
So
one of my favorite songs to play.
the
Just 'cause
very
it's
first song they ever did with Neil Peart on the second Rush album, they had a different drummer on the first Rush album. Neil Peart joins the band. The opening track on that album, Fly By Night, is Anthem, and it's just like, okay, Neil Peart's here, and we are now officially not just a rock band, but we are a rock band with progressive elements in our music. And listen to our new drummer. And Anthem is just it's a smorgasbord of awesome drumming.
It's one of the more fun songs to play. Something I kind of realized once they went into the keyboard phase. After Signals, I'd say, they stopped having songs that were constantly like enjoyable to play. I mean, there's some parts of later songs that are like real cool riffs, real cool parts that are, you know, you can kind of get into it, but without it being a whole song, like anything, almost anything from, you know, the first 9 albums. You know, it's just kind of, can't really get into it without having the whole song there, you know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting because the last couple albums that they've done, the last couple studio albums, most recently Clockwork Angels and Snakes and Arrows, they got a new producer, Nick. I can't pronounce his last name for the life of me, but he's produced the Foo Fighters and some other more recent
up-and-coming bands.
Yeah, and he basically told them, we need to get you back to when you were really cool and you were doing the stuff that the original old school Rush fans died for. And so he kind of pulled more of that.
Yeah, kind of pulled them back into it, but not without saying, hey, repeat yourself. But just saying, you need to touch base every now and again.
Yep. But it's
And a lot of songs off those 2 albums are miles better than the ones from the previous middle stage albums and later. But I still think most of them are not as good as just about anything from the first 9 albums. I mean, a couple songs they match up well, but
it's, you know, it really makes you think that a lot of bands are they're lucky if they've got 5 albums, a 5-album streak, or 5 albums at all in their catalog that are great. You know, there are very few. I mean, Led Zeppelin had 10 albums in their existence, and they're all great. But you know, there aren't a lot of bands like that.
I mean, to be fair though, I'm looking at all the stuff that Rush has put out. It's quite a lot of stuff. I think it'd be kind of worth mentioning. Putting out that many albums is also an achievement in itself. Because how many albums do they have?
They've been together since, that is a very good point about Rush. They've been together since '73. And Neil Peart joined in '75. So we'll just say since 1975, Rush has been active.
I mean, they've said that they're kind of just about done with, you know, producing albums at Clockwork Angels, and they might do a song here or there.
Yeah, but and they had some troubles.
So you say from 75 to 2013, that's
But they stay together. The three of them.
38 years they stayed together.
And they're still very close. And you know, they've had some tragedies. Most notably, Neil Peart's wife and daughter both passed away back in, I believe it was 1997. So obviously he got out of it for a while, and they didn't know if they were going to return, but they did, and they made a few more albums, and so they've overcome a lot of diversity in their time. But it's just a feat for any band to stay together for that long and to still be excited about
not get tired of each other.
Yeah, yeah. So, and to have zero scandal, you know, zero drama. Yeah. So, and that's a testament to their commitment of being musicians first, and that is so inspiring to us, you know, to look at.
Really what you said is the kind of guideline, or not really a guideline, but the real peak, I would say, more than a guideline, because if that was the guideline, oh my God. But the real peak of what a good band looks like.
Yeah, they are
not just a band that produces good music, but a good band. Whether you like Rush's music or not, you still have to admit
you operate.
They're wonderful at what they do, which is making music that
Yeah.
people enjoy and staying true to themselves and always trying new things and being
Their
progressive.
method of being great friends. Nobody's trying to do the same thing and competing within the band. It's like it's a whole synergy, and their philosophy of,
well, you know, still kind of saying, "No, dude, that sucks," and then them saying, "Yeah, I guess you're right."
Yeah, they're very little ego involved in what they do, and it's always about the work. They just want to do great work, and that for us is the most inspiring thing. And they get out and they play. You know, Neil Peart has often said, if you're not playing live, you're not really a band, because that's what bands do, is they get out and they play live. So they work hard on presenting an album, and then they go and they tour so they can present it to people and in a live setting. And all of these things influence us deeply, and we could probably go on and on about Rush, but
I think we've summed everything up to the best of our abilities.
yeah. So in any case, we've got some new music we're going to be giving you some sneak previews of here pretty soon, and stay tuned. We want to thank everybody for all the support, and we'll be touching base with you soon on some other surprises. So till next time, keep on rocking.